Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci de nous rejoindre pour cette nouvelle série de webinaires. Il y a encore quelques jours, nous avons finalisé la série précédente qui était sur les enjeux de pollution lumineuse et aujourd'hui, nous avons le plaisir de lancer cette nouvelle série sur les observatoires du littoral, série que nous avons décidé d'initier avec nos collègues et amis du projet RECOS, Résilience des zones côtières, qui se passe dans l'océan Indien et qui est porté avec la Commission de l'océan Indien est soutenu financièrement par l'AFD, l'Agence française de développement, et le Fonds français pour l'environnement mondial. Alors, pourquoi les observatoires? Parce qu'effectivement, dans le cadre de nombreux développements de projets, mais pas uniquement, on retrouve la mise en place d'observatoires. Et aujourd'hui, à l'échelle mondiale, les observatoires des zones côtières sont vraiment un sujet parce que entre les impacts du changement climatique, mais l'ensemble des impacts des changements globaux, il est de plus en plus utile de suivre l'impact de ces changements et surtout de collecter ces données, de transformer ces données en informations, mais après de transformer ces informations en prise de décision. Et donc, c'est tout cela qu'on va essayer de voir ensemble pendant ce cycle de 4 épisodes. Donc, le premier épisode aujourd'hui sera sur un cadrage un peu général et on a la chance d'avoir 4 invités avec nous aujourd'hui qui vont nous illustrer de différents exemples, de différentes situations à l'échelle de la planète sur les différents observatoires qu'ils pilotent, qu'ils suivent ou qu'ils mettent en œuvre. Donc aujourd'hui, on sera sur effectivement ces grands aspects du lancement, de la mise en place et de la durabilité, qui est un enjeu majeur pour un observatoire, un enjeu qu'on retrouve justement dans la plupart des projets. Dans la plupart des projets, on décide de mettre en place un observatoire, mais après, il faut passer une étape. Il faut passer l'étape de la fin de projet. Comment cet observatoire, qui a été le fruit de beaucoup d'efforts, de beaucoup de réflexions et de financement, comment ces observatoires peuvent perdurer dans le temps. Donc c'est un peu tout ça qu'on va essayer de voir à travers cette nouvelle série, les 4 nouveaux épisodes consacrés aux observatoires du littoral. Petit rappel, un observatoire n'est pas un objectif en soi, c'est un moyen qui permet de mieux gérer, mieux anticiper, mieux préserver et surtout mieux agir sur les zones côtières afin d'arriver à un équilibre entre justement la vie humaine, les usages et la conservation de la nature et de la biodiversité et des paysages. Petit rappel, comme toujours au démarrage de nos webinaires, petit rappel sur le fonctionnement. Donc, nous avons aujourd'hui 4 invités qui seront avec nous aujourd'hui, qui vont participer à différentes tables rondes. Mais vous qui êtes participants, vous aurez l'opportunité de poser des questions en direct. Donc, l'idée, c'est que vous écriviez les questions dans la petite box qui s'appelle Q&A pour les applications en anglais et questions et réponses Q&R pour les applications en français. Donc, vous écrivez vos questions ici et Victor, qui est en charge de l'organisation de ces webinaires, va collecter ces questions, va les synthétiser pour celles qui sont proches et va ensuite être votre porte-parole auprès des différents invités aujourd'hui. Nous avons aussi l'opportunité aujourd'hui d'avoir une traduction. Donc, vous pouvez aller sur le petit globe qui est là aussi sur votre application, qui s'appelle Interprétation, et vous choisissez le canal dans lequel vous voulez écouter ce webinaire. Vous avez le choix entre le canal français ou le canal anglais. Pour les speakers, je vous remercie effectivement de faire attention à bien couper vos micros lorsque vous n'intervenez pas. Et rappelez-vous que vous êtes enregistré, puisque tout ça sera rediffusé sur les différents réseaux de RECOS, la COI et du Conservatoire du Littoral. Alors, tout ceci se passe dans un cadre d'un partenariat. Nous sommes plusieurs, mais le portage général est le portage de ICO, qui veut dire Île, Côte et Océan. C'est une initiative qui a été lancée il y a maintenant 4 ans par différents partenaires à l'échelle internationale et qui vise à trouver non pas simplement une accumulation de problèmes, mais surtout à chercher des solutions entre différents acteurs, des acteurs qui peuvent être des ONG, des scientifiques, des institutions, des organismes publics ou privés, des entreprises qui, tout ensemble, essayent de trouver des solutions pour mieux préserver nos îles, nos côtes et nos océans. Le Conservatoire du littoral, dont je suis le directeur de la coopération internationale, est un organisme public français qui achète des terrains en France, uniquement en France, de manière à les préserver durablement une fois qu'on est propriétaires, on ne peut plus vendre ces terrains. Et aujourd'hui, en France, on possède un peu plus de 13% du linéaire côtier qui sera protégé définitivement. Nous fêterons notre 50e anniversaire l'an prochain. Je vais passer la parole à Anne, qui va nous en dire plus sur le projet RECOS et la COI. Anne, je t'en prie.
Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde, bonjour Fabrice. Alors je vais commencer par les petits problèmes techniques qu'on rencontre, Fabrice. Alors d'une part, je pense qu'on partage pas encore le PowerPoint voilà, on a commencé, on n'a pas encore partagé. On a aussi un problème de traduction. Bellarmin, tu es en mute si tu m'entends. Donc, hop. On nous a notifié que la
Um,
traduction ne marchait pas. Ça y est.
we have been notified, but the interpretation is not working. Now it is working. Yes.
Ok, donc vous m'entendez bien?
So can you hear me properly now? Yes. Yeah.
Ok, donc je suis là, donc je représente
So
je représente
I
le
am
projet
representing
RECOS, la
the
COI.
RECOS project, the
Donc
IOC,
alors
and
excusez-moi, j'ai un petit problème
I'm
technique,
sorry,
décidément.
I have
Excusez-moi.
a small technical issue. I'm sorry about that.
Tout va bien, mais effectivement, on est un petit peu répartis sur toute la planète, là,
Ah,
entre différents
ah, ah,
intervenants qu'on retrouve de partout, et
ah.
donc il faut qu'on arrive à se mettre en phase, tous.
Voilà, ça y est. Ça y est. Donc, je m'excuse. Je représente le projet RECOS, qui est un projet porté par la COI. Donc, la COI, c'est une organisation intergouvernementale qui regroupe 5 États membres insulaires, donc Madagascar, Comores, La Réunion, au titre de la France, Maurice et les Seychelles et qui porte des projets de coopération dans divers secteurs, dont la préservation des écosystèmes la gestion durable des ressources. Et donc, nous portons un ensemble de projets pilotes dans l'océan Indien et menons un ensemble d'actions pour renforcer la résilience des populations et des écosystèmes côtiers donc dans le sud-ouest de l'océan Indien.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now that we have found the PowerPoint and the translation, maybe we can move on to the next on this project. So, as I was saying, this series of meetings, webinars is launched today on how to set up, facilitate, and sustain an observing system. And then the next session will be on coastal erosion and climate change impact. The third session will be on biodiversity and coastal ecosystems, which will be followed by the coastal socio-economic dynamics. We collect the data, transform them into information to be able to be used into coastal uses to better react and act for preserving those zones. On the today's organizing team, I have already introduced myself on the webinar. So I would like to thank Victor, who was with his RECOS colleague on setting up this webinar. And I would like to thank them and the one who will be behind the question chat box when he comes to bring all the questions that would be posted on the chat box, and then Anne will be on the technical and logistics support for this webinar. And I would like to thank Bellarmine for the interpretation, and he will also be interpreting in the future session. So today's agenda for the session one, we will have Nicolas, who will talk about the creation and the facilitation of an observing system. It will be followed by a question and answer session. And then there will be a roundtable with 4 people for the challenges on the functioning and sustainability of those observatories, which will be more or less different from the normal webinar. So and today there will be 4 guests. We have Nicolas Ledantec, Moussa Sall, Julie Pagny, and Aina Le Nommé Minasu. So unfortunately, there is a problem of the camera, but he's there, but he cannot show himself. So what I am suggesting you for each guest will introduce himself, and now I will give the floor to Musa Sal, who is going to introduce himself. So the floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much, Fabrice. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Musa Sal. I work within the Dakar Regional Observatory under the supervision of Ministry of Environment and Ecology, and I followed academic studies at the University of Dakar, and which was I got the diploma of a master degree in geology and natural sciences. And then after that, I started research thesis on geography at the laboratory of Mans in France. And then my thesis was on flood risks in the city of Saint-Louis in Senegal and under the two rivers into the Atlantic Ocean. And since 2013, I've been working on this problematics related to coastal risk management on the program of risk evaluation and environmental management. Thank you very much, Musa. He is a specialist, and we are have a chance to have him to share his experience, and we will have the floor later on. Now the floor is yours, Julie Pagny, please. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I am the director of Normandy and Hauts-de-France Coastal Observation Network. I followed little coastal geomorphology studies, so I have a master too in littoral management systems. So I am also an engineer in an engineering firm in trying to find the routes for cables across different countries. I also work in Brittany as well, and I have worked in this observatory for each European project, which focuses on problematics of adaptation on five workshop sites in Normandy and in England on coastal issues. So I now take the management of the management in 2017, and then the management of the public network on this network since 2020. Thank you very much, Julie, for your introduction. Now, let's give the floor to Aina. Please, could you introduce yourself? Thank you very much, Fabrice. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aina Ledon Numeni Sua. Since 2014, it means for 10 years now, I have been working in different NGOs, public and private sectors. Throughout which I have used
la mise en place
geospatial information in setting up a coastal infrastructure, following up the marine and coastal habitat, but also in resolution of conflict resolution and the use of marine spaces, but also working with Madagascar Oceanographic Data Center. I have been there for 2 years, and I am now working on my doctoral studies in collaboration with University of Tulare and a university in Belgium. So that's all about me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aina, and from the examples and the different intervention you are going to give, we will give further details on different aspects of how this observatory, coastal observatory, working. And now I'm going to give the floor to Nicolas Le Dantec to introduce, for him to introduce himself, and then we will continue. So, Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Moi, je suis ingénieur de
Thank you,
recherche.
Fabrice. Good morning, everyone. I am a research engineer at the Western Brittany University in Brest, which is the European University Institute. I have an engineering and physics studies, physical and geoscience on the coast, the evolution of beaches and the different marine dynamics. So for a few years, I have been and coordinating the integrated observatory on integrated coastal risk in Brittany, known as OSI risk. So now let's move on to the next slide. So this presentation and introduction is a kind of an experience feedback on how this coastal observatory work and how it was developed. Some keywords I would like to highlight on the title, this idea of co-construction, co-design on vulnerability. So these are the two messages I would like to mention. Next slide, please. So some slides just for the framework in general. The coastal areas are a very attractive environment because there are a lot of amenities, so we can take the advantages, in the upper photos, but also some impact on the lower images, the erosion and submersion as well. And we see a lot of hazards. We should not forget the risk, the hazards. So the problem at coastal risk are highly related to the urbanization of the coastal zones, and we are faced with these littoral issues. With an example here in Brittany on the left in the year 1950s, very few use of the coastal zones, but now it has become a whole city. The same thing on the island of Cayenne as well. So the risk is really the combination of natural and anthropogenic processes. Dangerous exposure. Next slide, please. So some few lines and few points on geomorphology and coastline evolution in Brittany. So we have a very large coastline, more than 4,000 coastline, which can be divided into it's a succession of small bays and estuaries with different types of coast, tidal rain, swell, patch, sediment covers, a lot of dune, coastal dunes, shoals, cliffs, and all of this. So there are a lot of diversities around, and the national indicators for erosion gives an evolution of it is going back 6% of decline, whereas a sediment accumulation. Another way to see the thing is census. On the map on the left, on the impact of damages following heavy rain. So we see that all the coastline of Brittany is impacted following extreme events. Next slide. So to face this, there is a whole range of solutions. Recognize that level of the government for national strategy, coastal management, which are more stronger and more supporting solutions. There are many things to be implemented, which will be in agreement with the on-site observation, because there is a spatial and time aspect. So to be sustainable, to be adapted to future hazards. So next slide. And in practice, we understand, we realize that there are a lot of barriers in implementing those solutions. Most of the time, we are on defense against sea. It has a history of crisis management. There is an indifference of people living in those coastal areas. So anyway, there are on local authorities, but also on residents, on the strategies, short-term strategies, with blind trust in technology and public authorities and profit-driven. So we are not at the phase of implementing all of those space management, but there are still a lot of challenges, that will allow us to reduce the risk. So consequently, I think that you have skipped the slide. If you could come back. So to address the issue on ecological and coastal challenges, there are solutions for defense and protection for more of accompanying solutions. Also, there is a paradigm change on observation that are more hazarded on the integrality of a system. What we mean by general vulnerability. I'm going to talk about this later on, which is more focused on natural-based solution and anthropogenic aspect, and then the need to develop competencies on long-term observation. There was a point on the previous slide which was saying that we are in a context of responsibility transfer at a national level, especially in France, to the local players. So this is an important aspect at a local level. Next slide, please. So this image on the left is a traditional definition of hazard. So the two components that are very important to add is on the management. There are not many coastal observatories that monitor those observations. So social representation, which means that people think of the risk. The idea is that the two components where we have, in fact, the action to reduce the challenges and reduce the risk because we have, in fact, the control on the hazards. So all of this multidisciplinary approach, which was defined at the University of Est for those working in human science and soil and life sciences. So that's the first point, working on the vulnerability, systemic vulnerability. So the graph on the left is rather clear, along the time to have the idea of the vulnerability. It is very interesting to observe the trajectories on the four components. We develop some indicator in each of these components and the way to represent them here on spatial data with 50 to 800 meters for us to have different representation of them, to have an overall vision. And on the right, we see we have a screenshot of a platform known as OSI, which is an interactive platform. We have the link there that will allow us to navigate in vulnerability to understand what are the determinants of factors of vulnerability, but also the hotlines and different actions. The second point in deploying this methodology is from concept to action is to have a partnership and an institutional framework. It was possible on the Finisterre territory thanks to financing, but also thanks to human resource support for implementing those measures that go beyond the observation. But of course, we have the observation and support and awareness raising, information, those components that will go with the observation that will go further in terms of ownership, challenges, and observation tools, and some local expertise. Next slide, please. So how does it work in practice? The collectivity also adheres to the observation of vulnerability to coastal erosion and submersion. So there are a lot of protocols, mainly on hazards, but also we put some banking tools for data analysis. I was talking about the OZ platform, but also another one for morphological data. The idea is on the right, it depends on the measure, the tools, the arrangement where we should go better, do better, and develop a strategy for coastal risk management in relation to the diagnosis of trajectories. And the third point, to implement this in a concrete way, there is a need to commit for co-construction between researchers
collaborative, donc pas participative,
and actors.
qui est aussi une très bonne option
It
pour le
is a collaborative observation, in fact, which is all a good option for developing an observation,
qui vise à la
but a collaborative and with the managers, which will need to produce
donc en 4
knowledge, but
étapes,
also science is used for on-site scientists, the information
les plateformes
support, optimization of tools and platform for interpretation analysis and banking analysis for decision-making aid tools. So these are all the components for Maire Electoral for the
au-delà
University
de
of Brest. So it's a whole experience on the side of the data. Next slide. And then I'm going to mention those 4 points. We have developed different action on site and on in-room training.
des documentaires,
We developed some documents and videos, online explanation, a lot of training tools, in fact. Next slide, please. And then the support on site to follow up that will be at the locality level, that we can use also service provider. We define the priorities, the protocols, we accompany them on site to implement the monitoring, and in terms of accessibility of measurement tools, which will contribute to deployment of a collaborative
qui permet
network on a GPS basis that measure the differential. Some 100 euros to collect data, which is
qui sont
the same
typiquement utilisés dans la communauté
quality of what we can get from rather more expensive tools which are used in among the academia. So this tool is more appropriate and very important in its capacity to observe. Next slide. So
de
all
visualisation.
these data, we have the two platform to visualize and to interpret all of the data. On the left, we have some 60 indicators for the analysis of systematic vulnerability in the 4 components, and also the hazard on tech. And then on the right, we have a specific portal for
des profils de plage pour
visualization processing of data for all of the beach profiles. Next slide, please. And now a small tools, or each color is one of each of a component. On the red, we represent
avant la mise en
the hazard component in 2018 before the setting up the observatory. So there were more than 100 sites followed up and by the scientific partners, but now there are only 40. More than 56 of them was monitored by local collectivities and scientists. So, and then in green, the very few of them on pilot site, but then all of Finisterre municipalities have those indicators on management strategies set up for preserving and preventing the risk of erosion. And
diapositive aussi qui a un petit peu un bilan, donc il y avait un volet dans
so that's about this
civilisation, il y avait
a slide which gave information and awareness raising and observation and support. This is to say that we go beyond the observation. It is really to meet the needs of local actors. We bring the expertise, some kind of a second level support, but we come to a company to use as a bridge between the firms and the municipality technician to be sure that in their studies they got what they need, what they expect. This is a history from by a research project and the partners in Minister Department Council who help us. There is financing to deploy all of this in Brittany. And we have the objective of promoting at the long term and to have an integrated on systematic vulnerability to build approach and their implementing as well as building the capacity. So it is a rather original and relevant model for deploying observatory, which is not it is not limited to observation and not only the observation of the hazard, but it is a transferable project to have territories, to have observation domains, water quality, biodiversity, and a small example. We work with La Réunion coastal observatory, which is called as Not Port de Mer, in partnership with local players, University
approche,
of
mais
La
il en sera
Réunion, and many other stakeholders. But it is rather a matter of subject in the second series of our webinar. So if you have any question, I'm listening to you. Thank you very much, Nicolas. It was rather interesting. By taking all of these examples, you showed to everyone that an observatory is not just for observation, but also the whole environment, a whole ecosystem of hazard, but also how to accompany those partners using harness racing. So, any questions before moving to the round table? We understood that it's not the region who owed the littoral coastal observation, but it's a more scientific dynamic. So how do we move from this dynamics of project research into a more sustainable actions with stakeholders, political or decision makers? So at the beginning, it was a research initiative where we were trying to deploy beyond the pilot territory and Finistère, which is a
en France parce qu'il s'est
department which is rather original compared to other department in France, which were,
humide.
more focused on this project. They had an experience on more humid, wet areas between the players, on
Finance en parallèle des actions
actors and scientists, because they finance in parallel with action research and thesis, and they solicited us for support in 2013-14. So they were solicited and to strengthen
comment prioriser.
and arrangement and to see how to prioritize. And we were solicited initially for expertise sharing and support, and the observation
Ensuite,
was
que
one of a component. And then after that, they were convinced by this
et qu'ils nous ont aidés à
integrated approach and observatory that help us to implement all this. Another question on the sustainability. Maybe it is a point that we will also raise later on in the roundtable. Earlier on, you said that some collectivities are there to these services. So, are there sales of
il
services?
fonctionne à la
No. At this time, it's for free, but it is thanks to financial support of the department, but also thanks to a research project. We try to find at the regional level all the other departments of Brittany that will allow to operate this observatory, because if you support on collectivity financing, it will have an equality between the continental France and also
on cherche vraiment
mainland France, those who do not have means, or so we really need to develop the internal competencies, and we solicit them already, not financially speaking, but at the time, but they invest to get the information, to share their expertise and their data, and commit in a monitoring approach. So they financially contributing to it, but in another way. One last question before giving the floor to the roundtable, but it is a matter of competence challenges. The small local collectivities of the services, technical services within the collectivities are not that numerous, or nor they have sufficient competencies. So is it complicated to collect data and create the services? Will it allow us to produce rather solid
Ces services-là,
data that can be used? That's the first point. Are these services who use the data through a centralization between us researchers to better understand and get information from this data? On competencies, on the relevance of data. So, well, what we can say is to try
bancarisation des données.
to make tools available for data on centralizing data on the server, but they are available as well for them to be disseminated to everyone. But the idea
plus autonome
is
possible.
that the players who collect the data need to be as autonomous as possible for them to do the interpretation and valuing steps themselves to support in the interpretation. But the idea is to develop competence
Et c'est voilà l'idée d'avoir des
along the chain. And that's the idea of having an interactive and open platform for people to collect the data, to understand where the doubts come in the data and what it means data of such a quality that they require on depending on the compared to the on-site data and compared to the observation and they can also manipulate themselves. So the idea is that they become as autonomous as
Bien sûr, ça
possible,
demande.
and we only support them when required. So it requires a lot of training effort, a lot of this availability, continuous training from our side because there is a lot of renewal of staff, of people. We know that it works very well, but we need to focus. But it is a matter of availability on the training of those people. But the question is on a pair of elected technicians, but then in terms of whether they have the resources, but we are helping on erosion because there are very recent regulation on the GMAP law. The first one is on projection that require the collectivity to take into their hand those competencies. So we do it in a pragmatic way. So master students who started as an internship, and we want to see
Stage, c'est une manière pas
these
très chère.
localities, and in intensive, it is a way, a less expensive way to take things into our hand, and then we, later on with a long-term contract, and that's how we install the competencies little by little, and the university can bring the competencies in terms of observation and training as well, initial training and continuous training. Maybe a last question, but I will also take advantage of this for the participants to continue to send the question on the chat box. So don't hesitate to write your questions in the Q&R question on the data being solid. So as a researcher, if I understood very well, the local collectivities are able to collect and use those data at their municipal level or the involved territories. So do you at a regional scale that will allow us to trust a more solid and more natural data? Yes, thank you for this question. The idea is that those data will have equivalent quality of scientific data for them to be used for scientific analysis to help in decision making. That's why we put those tools to the collectivities to, well, we have data that are more accurate at the sentimental level to make sure that the collection be made in the standards. So until they are autonomous, so we validate with them with the data. So indeed, it is good. It's not a secondary quality data. It is an equivalent quality to scientific data. Thank you very much for this clarification on those questions. What I'm going to suggest now is that we move on the round table where three other guests will join us and to present the observatories with which they are working and to tell us more how it operates in 3 minutes. So Musa, could you please take the floor and present to us Orloa, which is a regional West African coastal area observatory. So please introduce yourself and then answer this question. And then later on, there will be some questions. Don't hesitate to post your question in the chat box. You can open the camera if you would like to, and if you can. Thank you very much, Fabrice. The camera is. I cannot open the camera. The camera is closed on my side. Um, this observatory I'm working for, Orloa, is at regional scale, covering 12 countries, member of these, Mauritania, Benin, Sao Tome and Principe. So it covers on thousands of kilometers of coastline, a lot of morphology, dominated by sediment rocks at 95%. All of the topics that on which we focus, and there are thematics on demographic scales, because 50% of urban population are located on those areas. So the marine submersion are also topics that we need to also address with 48% of those places that constitute of mangrove ecosystems. So, there are a lot of pollution by carbohydrates. So we address this as well. The implementation process of this observatory started in 2018 on the project of investment for coastal management resilience in Western Africa, and launched under the Wakado project with the World Bank support. But with Orloa, there was observation mission which was launched in 2013 by the ECOWAS under this regional program on fight against coastal erosion, which counts 11 countries from Mauritania up to Benin. So up to now, this center is in charge of implementing this observatory, but this work in harmony with the country, which are supposed to set up national observatory that will work at a regional level. So there are teams at the country level to set up arrangements and tools for indicators. At the regional level, we have identified some indicators on the coast, the pollution, and all of the challenges we have identified. And these same indicators will be monitored at a country level by the national observatories which are being set up. We also proceed to the regular updating of the data, which will conducted on this area since 2011. And first of all, every 4 years, since 2020, on updating of this plan. And then for this time, it is the World Bank through Orloa who fund this observatory. And but this observatory should be funded by more, but by the country through the different national observatory being implemented, and a lot of technical and financial partners and regional institutions who work in this process are also interested in. So that's what I can say for a moment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Musa, for all of this general information on Orloa, on different thematics that you work on. Now I give the floor to Julie. We are going to change the hemisphere and temperature because we are going to move to Normandy for him to present the role. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the facilitator for activating my camera. It is the weather is very good also in Normandy, in France. I was not doubting about good time, but we are in the different weather from Senegal in Dakar to Normandy. So this observation, coastal observation of Normandy, it is true that in France there is a particular scale for intervention because it has an interregional scale. from up to the Belgian frontier, which has a long coastline. So the role is a first partnership dating back in 2010 between the Littoral Conservatory and the Normandy region. At the time, it was lower and higher Normandy regions, and this initiative was motivated by the fact that there were a lot of data on this coastal dynamics, but were not always accessible for the end users of those data. And sometimes there are databases disseminated in time and space, and the vision was not exhaustive. So the observatory and the region gathered together to create this platform, which is our target audience are technicians of collectivities. We don't work directly with the public, but the idea is to make the links between scientists who produce the data and the users at the territorial level. So in 2020, we made the choice to make this observatory network to be self-sufficient, that will allow us to work with our initial partners, which is the Normandy region, and then also add the Northern France region and the government, because they are also vital partners in coastal management partners. So there are three main purposes, which are the coastal dynamics, which is on the natural risk and coastal areas, but also on biodiversity, but as markers of an evolution of the area. And we can also try to understand who do what, when, and how on coastal dynamics. We have several approaches. The role is, first of all, it was historically speaking a portal to aggregate data, but which did not produce, but to make a number of data produced by universities and public institutions. So we developed a portal accessible by everyone on the website, and which consolidates the knowledge, and we have catalog, which and show the data and how to take them. And then there is a tool which is very interactive, which works at regional scale up to local level, which is organized according to different thematics of territorial vulnerability, etc. There are 8 of them. And there is a part which consists in 4 watching, in fact, which is for new projects. We also have a whole activity on facilitation, on animation at local level. So we have on-site workshops with a member of our scientists, because their role is on scientific advisory. It covers a total of 30 staff, a lot of university professors, but not only them. So we can organize some local workshop with the technicians and local people who are motivated. So we organize a kind of seminar on thematics, on the indicators which are available for the local collectivities who on the erosion mapping with regard to the law on resilience, coastal resilience. And then since 2016, the role has become also portal for data production, because we were entrusted the mission to coordinate the campaign to high resolution data. And we have a whole system in an aircraft to scan the coast in 3D system from 5 meters to 1,500 meters high. So these are data acquisition recurrent, done every 3 years and every 10 years, for every 6 years for bathymetric data. So we coordinate the acquisition of this data, we store them, and we put them available
pour faire connaître.
We open them to all the users who would like to get them. So to disseminate the data, we organize a training session. We're using the EDA tool, and we put them available on a territory that need the support to try to understand and mobilize those data. So these are quickly what I can say. Maybe to specify that our public interest group is a General Assembly that gathers the different members, the full members, and it's a scientific board as well that I mentioned, which is the basis of our expertise. And also we have the classical technical committees that cover the funders of a project. Thank you very much, Julie. That was very clear, very full. And we understand this observatory, which is more than just an observatory, a lot of activities, a lot of training as well. Before giving the floor to the next speaker to present his observatory in Madagascar, I would like to say that you can ask your question on the creation, how we can create an observatory, and the second one is on the operation, and then on the sustainability. So you can ask the question to the different speakers, especially on the creation, the operation, and the sustainability of an observatory. So, Aina, I'm giving you the floor to present the observatory of Madagascar. Thank you very much, Fabrice. It is the MDNODC, Madagascar National Oceanography Data Center, created in December 2000 by 4 ministries: Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research. There is also the Ministry of National Education, the Ministry of Meteorology, and the Ministry of Environment at that time, with the support of the IOC and UNESCO and Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and the CNBO management is managed by the Aeronautic and Marine Science Institute, and the data at the center come from data from oceanographic expedition in the Madagascar economic and exclusive economic zone, and data collected from coast, satellite imageries and digital models. The mission of the center is to collect, to archive, quality control, disseminate oceanographic data and information to various users. Now, you work beyond the aspect where we just generate data, which means that progressively speaking, we try to translate this data into information to inform decision making. That's why we integrated regional Indian Ocean and Africa consortium. It includes several countries of the western, southwestern Indian Ocean area. The objective is to translate those information into different decisions, such as detection, follow-up of coastal risk and critical habitats. So the financing of the center is fully funded by the EHSM through regional projects, including this one I've just mentioned, but also through different international projects that we have obtained in collaboration with other universities and other research universities. Institution. So that's about this MDNODC. Thank you very much, Aina. I would like to ask our Julie to open the camera. All of our. So the first question is how to create an observing system. If you could share your experience in regard to your respective observatory, your national observatory. So first question, that's it. And you can still continue to ask your question because Victor is covering the question, and then I'm going to give him the floor later on to ask the questions. So, so the question is how the actors involved who may say that it can work or it may not work. So it's a rather general question, but Nicholas was talking about the starting point of their observatory in Brittany, which was rather for scientific purpose. So according to you, is there any other model that will make this approach work on the long run on the creation of an observatory? Yes, Julie? So for me, it's rather a mix compared to what Nicolas was sharing, because at the same time it is Stéphane Costa from the University of Caen and the delegate from Normandy who had the idea to this unique entry available for actors who are non-technicians but who are involved in littoral management, coastal management, to access to those information, data produced but are not always accessible. It's not that the researchers don't want to give the data, but there is no direct link between collectivity leaders and the researcher or a university researchers. So the idea is to put this bridge to be the facilitator between the coastal managers who need to take decision every day, but also for the future of their coasts, but also the data providers. So the findings was also within the higher and lower Normandy's regions and Picardy. They found that their managers who were in the quest of data and those institutions found themselves to pay the same data acquisition without having the data. And then anyway, it's not in their mission to do this. So the idea is to have a platform, a unique entry point that will allow everyone to find information and also to know if it doesn't exist yet. So it is legitimate to call a firm or any other entity for the acquisition of this data.
Oui,
Maybe, yes, next verse. Musa? Yes, Fabrice, for Western Africa, it is a rather political will because these parties, from the findings, when the coastal risks were increasing, so the African Western, well, in 1997, from the meeting at that time, so in 2007, 10 days later, they launched the regional program against coastal erosion by governing the whole countries on this coastal space from Mauritania to Benin. And then countries were not part of the organization of the ECOWAS. And on those 11 countries, plus the countries who were not part of
font partie de l'EO. Ils ont donc eu une vision vraiment globale.
So they had a global vision, an integrated vision. So under this political will, in 2007, they launched the plan for the management plan to capitalize as a basic product, and then the drafting of the observatory, and then which means that it was a matter of political will, because all of the attitudes that conducted on the scientific committee, because in terms of governance, they gathered at the ministerial level to validate this observatory. And then when this plan was being implemented in 2011 and given to the minister, they took the volunteer to say that, yeah, we need to set up a regional observatory that will coordinate this
viser cet espace-là.
work because the plan kind of subdivided the different spaces, but it needed to be coordinated, but information were available on the challenges, on the hazards in terms of biodiversity, in terms of people presence. And from 2018, they decided, the minister decided to move to the use of observatory at a regional level to try to regularly update the plan and also some indicators as well. So it is a matter of political will. So why do you opted for a regional scale rather than cover of a union of national observatories? Well, because our problems go beyond our coast, our frontiers, pollution. It is beyond every country's frontier borders. So not one single country can master or control all this, and the solution that are given in country in terms of development, in terms of setting up measures. So we need to collaborate with neighboring countries. So that's why the country decided to work together by drafting a common policy to solve this problem. Thank you very much. Nicholas, would you like to add something on the creation aspect? Yes, I wanted to come back to the element of the objective is to understand and act, and those who
locale.
act are people who are in charge of a public policy at a local level. We see that we know that
Et donc c'est vraiment important
the solution and its implementation at local level is very important to the associate the people in charge of the
locale. Après,
implementation of action at the local level, and then the leading of the observatory is to gather all of the actors, scientists, public actors, because they
périmètre et comme
are the ones who are active in the different areas. There are different configurations for actors meeting. Well, once it is guided, the people who implement the local policies, that's how we can move on to local strategy and put them into actions. Thank you very much. This answers to my question. So an observatory is not an objective, but it is a mean that leads us to implementing some political choices and management choices as well. We know that one person or an organization or an institution himself in setting up an observatory without confronting to the reality on the decision makers and policy makers. They needed to associate other partners. Before giving the floor to Victor for our question, maybe Aina, could you please also answer this question on the creation of your observatory, which were initiated? Who were the actors involved at the beginning? Thank you very much, Fabrice, once again.
C'est-à-dire le CNDO de
The National Oceanographic Data Center was set up following the IOC UNESCO initiatives, and the idea originally, knowing that in the IOC there are more than 150 countries, and there are 155 of them has an MDC a center like ours. So the objective is to improve the general partnership and the oceanographic data sharing, because we all know that oceans are vast and occupy 70% of a globe. So to collect data regularly and representative at a global level, it costs a lot of commitments, and having the center facilitate the exchange, the sharing of data. This is in general the reason why
Et une fois que
why our center was created in 2000. And
le
once
support
the initiative was launched, the support was facilitated by our ministry in Madagascar,
de mentionner tout à
the
l'heure,
ministry I've just mentioned earlier, the four ministries I mentioned earlier on. Thank you very much, Aina. Let's in Normandy, there are a lot of meetings as well between the scientists in Brittany and also policymakers, but also same in Western Africa, an international organization, and in Madagascar.
Contribuer à sensibiliser et puis à faciliter après la prise de
Well, to
décision.
be able to contribute and raise the awareness after decision making. So, Victor, you can ask the question.
Merci pour vos
Good morning,
interventions.
everyone. Thank you for your different intervention. There are a lot of questions I received. First question for
Justement, si le CNDO
Aina. Someone was asking whether the NODC
avait les
is focused on a particular region in Madagascar, or they have the means to act on the whole large island,
il y
Madagascar.
a plusieurs
As I
CNDO
mentioned earlier, there are several NODCs in
au niveau
global
de
level.
Madagascar.
So we, in Madagascar level, we are focusing only on
Notre pays uniquement.
at the national level only. You know, the data, oceanographic data for our country.
répondu
And another question, maybe Nicole has answered in the chat, but maybe Musa or Aina, you may have some
François-Xavier
additional response. So François Gravé is saying that they are also creating a local
aussi
observatory for their territory. So it may also be
il reprenait le
the idea for national or international observatory. So he was saying the fact that Nicola
centré sur
was
les
saying
aléas.
that an observatory should not be focused on hazards only, but also he wanted to understand the detection approaches where all the actions were conducted about hazards, you know, different questions. Some challenges were also mentioned. I don't know, Musa, Julie, or Aina may answer this question. Well, just an experienced advice for us where we are at this stage of creating an observatory in the mainland France or in the overseas France. In fact, we have a national network for all the observatories on the territories, but well, it's a kind of it allows us to share experience, but it also be there to accompany players who are also in the same initiative. There's a platform available online that can also give clarification on this dynamic. So the choice of thematics on the monitoring and role related to the composition of the scientific council, which is interested in this coastal dynamics and which is more multidisciplinary. We are more on the sediment that covers a lot of geography specialists and physics specialists. There are, you know, a lot of ongoing projects. We open more to thematics related to vulnerability, to exposure of players and goods on these hazards and thematics that can also evolve depending on the context at the moment. Well, to solicit researchers who will bring different thematics in our points of reflection. Thank you very much, Julie. Musa, I will let you answer this question, or I may also ask you another question on the specificities related to coastal observatory with regards to development. You know, in France, they are a national network
financement, des capacités, enfin voilà, et une structuration.
we have all this and the structuration of administrative structure because you know a lot of observatory in Africa. So could you please answer this? Thank you very much, Fabrice, and thank you for the person who posted that question on taking into account those risk, hazards, and stakes. Well, we will take those two dimensions, the hazards and especially related to demography. So we work on these indicators as well. So as you also said, Patrice, it's a reality in our Western African countries in terms of development. It's a particularity because we start with a lot of deficits, on the information collection, deficits in terms of organization, mobilization of team who should be in charge of data collect for the observatory. We were in a deficit in terms of observation tools as well, with equipment that needed to be set up and technical capacity to set up. And there is also the financing aspect. I think it is the most difficult point on our countries, and to take into account the financing of those international national observatories, and the team. So these are issues we are confronted. Yeah, of course, you are eligible for different financing channels, as you mentioned, that will allow to initiate, but then there is the complexity on the long run, on the sustainability. Of course, the donors are not always there to fund on long term. So when you initiate something, it is possible, but then on the sustainability, it is there is a gap. In fact, thank you very much. Any other topic on the creation of observatory? I also would like to get feedback on the main difficulties encountered by when we started on the involvement of different actors in finding financing, the techniques of setting up protocols, of initial data collection, setting up conventions with different partners. So what are the major difficulties encountered, and what are the tips or solutions that you can also share that would be useful for people who are listening to us and who are implementing their own observatories?
Ok, je peux me lancer pour cette question.
Nicolas, please go on. Okay, I can answer this question. Everything you said, Fabrice, are difficulties. There are many of them. The financing, actors association, but in fact, maybe to expect a rather long process, knowing that many observatories will share the same experience feedback. You cannot do it from one day to the next, on the question, on the components at the same time. We started progressively, maybe not across the whole country, but maybe with a pilot test. It's a process that is rather long, even on the structure, the governance, and configuration steps. And we need to expect a long run work, with partners, institutions who have a political commitment, in the long run.
C'est pour ça qu'effectivement on en parle spécifiquement.
Yes, that's the very first objective, and that's why we are speaking of initiating observatory under project dynamics that lasts for 3-5 years as a project. But then the idea is for the observatory to sustain on long term. But Julie, maybe you can also give an answer to this question on difficulties because
que je vais solliciter peut-être.
unfortunately we don't have Aina on the camera, but maybe Musa. Yeah, there is also the slowness of a process because each time we need to
de tous les résultats.
mobilize the ministers, the people for the result, perspectives. So it is a very slow process. So involving the ministers will slow down the process, and mobilization of the team across the country
Le
is
soutien
very difficult. If there is no support you would like on the ideal organization is not set up in the country, and the cost of meeting, technical meeting, because sometimes to move forward, you need to meet at regional level with a meeting among all the countries, but it costs, and we need to bear this cost. And even in terms of communication as well in the network, sometimes there are difficulties encountered with internet connection issues, etc. Thank you very much. And indeed, you have mentioned more complexities when it comes at regional or international level. Yeah. Even at the national level, the problems are there, but especially for the case you mentioned, there are more problems, more issues at a regional and international level. But it is important to understand this international approach. Aina, could you please react on the main difficulties you have encountered, and whether you managed to brush up? Thank you. We, on our side,
J'ai rencontré plusieurs centres de données
met a lot of oceanographic data centers in
les difficultés sont pas
Africa, and the difficulties are more or less the same everywhere, you know, on material,
pour travailler justement
equipment, and human resource issues, challenges. Even we are not,
si vous voulez répondre à
you
des
know,
appels à projets internationaux,
we are prone to these problems as well. And even if we would like to
étudier pour
reply to international calls for proposal, it's very highly competitive, and it is very difficult to be different from other regional neighboring countries. But there are many things, many ways you can deal with this problem with regard to the approaches we are identifying to get financial resources to start the observatory and
la thématique numéro
sustain their sustainability. And that's for the thematic number 3, I think. But for now, the main difficulties on which we are encountering, I think that there are people, is especially on data collection of lost data and setting up of an efficient data planning. And my predecessor, the former leader of this center, he had the project to make all of the data available online in 2021. It was a very interesting project. Unfortunately, he left us too early. He was the only one available to access to the data. He didn't have time to have this system set up. So when I came, we had to repeat almost everything, and I took a lot of time to take the data from the different partners in many countries, and we are now setting up a data management system, which means that all the data that we produce and generate needs to follow the principles: easy to access, accessible, interoperable, and so the idea is to secure what we have done without to restart from zero. That's it.
Julie, un dernier mot rapide et puis après on change de thème ou partira sur le
Oui,
fonctionnement.
moi,
Maybe very last words from you, Julie. Yes, I agree with
la donnée, tout à fait
all
d'accord.
the intervention on the data management. It is really a challenge that we need to preserve from one day to
Des moyens
the
techniques.
next. It requires a lot of technical and financial means to organize all these. And
La
on this
résilience dans la
question, of resilience and sustainability of an observatory. I do
Une
agree that at the beginning we can it can work on a basic proposal. At the beginning, we were a platform that linked between the producer and user of data, and then little by little, the mission changed into evolved extremely rapidly, and then we increased in terms of territory because at the beginning we were only in Normandy and Picardy, and then we asked also solicited to take the higher France level. So a lot of work to be repeated, and even when we are present for many years on a given territory, the technicians, the leaders also change. So it's a long work to make all of this known. And last point on the complementarity, because there are many actors in France working on this matter of data production, availability, and the dissemination. And sometimes it is rather difficult to work in an intelligent way, whether there is a place for everyone, to make sure to work in complementarity with the other actors. Thank you.
S'inscrire dans le temps, ne pas espérer tout résoudre tout de suite, ne pas
thank you very much for mentioning all of these on the different thematics, the topic being addressed, but sharing also with different partners, you know. So you developed quickly along the time and managed to find a solution for the sustainability, for trying to find financing means. Now, in terms of the functioning of an observatory through governance, partnership, how we can collect data.
La parole à Victor, puisqu'il vient de me
I would like to give the floor to Victor now, because he was telling me that there are so many questions on this part. So, Victor, thank you for your contribution in summarizing
notamment sur les
all these
partenariats.
questions. So there is a question on the partnership and a question asked during Nicolas' presentation, the partnership between the North-South University. Someone was asking to give more details on
La question des
this type of partnership and answer this question of partnership
de vos observatoires.
on the functioning of your observatory.
La question est double. Il y a du partenariat pour le territoire qui souhaite.
In fact, there are two questions. There are partnership for the territories who would like to set up an observatory, so we need to group the actors. That's what we said. And I think that the question of North-South partnership was more on transfer problem. There are double question on the problem of transfer. There is always a possibility under a project to collaborate on the setting up, to transfer, an experience, the feedback, and
acteurs locaux pour le maintien dans le temps.
Local actors to maintain them.
Et pour associer les acteurs.
Time to sustain and associate the local actors should be based
et qui vivent
on the local forces who live in the territory. I don't know if this answers this question. And then for the partnership, we've talked about it already, but what is important, it is the idea to involve the local actors. Just the fact of having a partnership, it stays a longer time, but this means that concretely speaking, the technician in the collectivities who will beneficiaries of training and the data collection, it's part of their mission as well. Because as long as there is a convention of leaders and the technician, they know that it's part of their mission. So it gives how sustainability very concrete from one day to the next. It's not only on a volunteering basis or but it's part of their professional attribution. So I think this is a key question for them to mobilize their time. Thank you very much for answering this question on different geographic areas. Anyway, there are many exchanges. So what can you say as a positive point on things we can improve to make sure that the exchanges do take place?
Mais les États ont eu
So, as I said earlier, it's a matter of a political will, but we need to develop with regional institutions such as international
aires marines protégées, le partenariat
the Union for Nature
conservation
Conservation on the Abidjan Conservation and Marine Protected Area, the Partnership for
se mobiliser pour
Western African Coastal Marine Preservation. So all of these for the designing and the functioning of regional
si vous voulez,
observation observatory which open partnership, but at technical level as well, some partnerships are being established with institutions such as the European Space Agency, even the NASA, with whom a partnership will be built for the acquisition and availability of some spatial data. And then there are also partnerships with institutions such as in the functioning of observatory, the indicators, the Friends
dans le cadre
Observatory with whom we work as well under the indicator monitoring and setting up solutions for protecting the coasts. Thank you very much, Victor, on the functioning of observatory Aina. Yes, there was also a question on participatory science, or the dissemination of data. Well, was done in your observatory, and if they were what were the constraints also being encountered? I don't know if any of speakers can answer this question as well. So please do not hesitate to answer this question at any time you would like to. On the teams to raise the awareness, experience feedback. I see that Musa is shaking his head, which means that, in fact, there is another person raising the hand. No, it's okay, thank you. In fact, with regard to the data dissemination, I'm going to talk about how the data are collected at the CNDO. In fact, the collected data and processed by our host institution are capitalized within the SNDO from different projects. So it is a problem I mentioned earlier on the data, the loss of data that I have mentioned earlier. We prefer now to concentrate on the EHSM data to securize the data before having another approach with an international partner. And we are now setting up a server, and we have already worked since last year, little by little, or as long as the data and the website are ready, we are going to open the website and all the data will be available to the public. Thank you very much. Musa, please. I just wanted to specify that earlier I said that we are not on the risk and hazards components, but also You know,
Nous nous focalisons sur cet
all
indicateur.
the indicators to monitor, we are focusing on this indicator, on the two components, challenge and hazard. For dissemination, we set up a
Des données.
platform for storage and sharing of data at regional level. So the regional observatory platform, but in relation with a different system in the countries, we also have a server of
Un
a
bulletin.
regional observatory and also a newsletter every 3 months that gives the information about this regional area. I have Nicholas on the participatory science. It is a tool for environmental education awareness raising. So,
L'Observatoire du Pays de Galles, voilà, qui présentera un outil.
because next week we'll have a Welsh
Régulièrement, et voilà. Est-ce que c'est quelque chose
presenter. So it is something that that is not ordinary, that can be useful. It is a tool for environmental communication.
Fois l'aspect sensibilisation
When
et
you
là,
gave the 2 points, there is the awareness aspect, and we are talking about the problematic of lacking from acceptability by the local residents, and not only to change the way, because people try to understand, we need to sensitize, but it is important to invest on this approach. And then in terms of the data quality, the question was asked earlier when I'm talking about collaborative approach, whether we have sufficient quality data. The answer is yes. In participatory science, we have less opportunities to train people who collect the data. So necessarily, there is a less better quality data. So, or the
de l'évolution.
cost snap allow us to have a qualitative data on the coastal data. The person may speak about this later on, but the quantitative data that could be extracted, we are not in an accuracy of some centimeters on the positioning, so it cannot replace. It is something in complement. We need to see it this way, but maybe there is. We need to be careful. It requires a lot of human resources to implement this participatory monitoring, because the challenge is to maintain the commitment of the users. It's not a matter of developing a telephone app. There are thousands of apps that people will use them. And then if there is a more interesting options on them, they will also use other applications. So there should be feedback to the communities of citizens who participate in. So we need to see it this way. That's the meaning of animating a network, and it requires a lot of human resources. Yes, I would like to agree
les gens pour s'assurer que les données soient robustes. Donc nous, on fait pas de
on Nicolas' intervention to make the data as solid as possible. We don't do participatory science, but we capitalize on some number of tools on the coast, and which are there to send us some damages that we would have observed when there are heavy rains and storms. So, in partnership with all the data, it requires that there should be a database that will be consolidated and stored somewhere at our level, and this database could be also be used by the different. And then we have a cartographic application that will value all of this data. We ask the question on the supra-validation of this data, because all of the people got training, but before publishing those data, they need to be shared and accepted and acceptable by everyone. And this supra-validation aspect takes a lot of time and a lot of responsibility on the same people. So participatory monitoring is very interesting,
une
and
dynamique
it makes the data in it's a real dynamics on a country, on a territory, but we need a lot of information to make sure on the solid data. Thank you very much, Julie, on this governance. We have a secretariat who pilot and collect all of the data. We have a scientific committee who answer the secretariat's question with a working group, thematic group on the training, etc., to animate the different models, classical models, ordinary model, even adaptation on the coastal territories. I'm sorry, we are delayed on all of these discussions. So the last topic is on the sustainability of an observing system. So how to succeed in the transition to the long term and the funding, at least the evolution perspective. So we need to think of the long term. So do you have any advice, any experience sharing, how it works, and observatories that failed to work? Why didn't it work on their side? What was the source of the failure as well?
Je commence
Yes,
comme ça.
please. Let me start so I can answer the question on governance, because for me it's the same thing. It's not the same thing, but it is important to build the objective. If we would like it to succeed at a long term, we need to always update all of the people involved, because on small action areas, geographic areas, on the basis of define end users and the potential producer of data, and then we build the objective. If everyone adheres to the approach, there is a chance to continue to find financing, because it has a double function: to understand and to also promote the action. So co-construction is a term that is key. Thank you very much, Nicolas. Now Moussa, and then Julie. Well, on the fact that it is important to conduct a feasibility study both for the national and regional observatories, it allows us to clarify how the partners can work together for an observatory, and it was also important for us to understand the network experts network through periodic meetings. We opened a platform for sharing and conduct of national observatories. So through this territory experts meeting, we could conduct some capacity building at a regular basis on this network. But to ensure the sustainability, funding is still vital beyond all of this. If you cannot fund the observatory on the long run, but also having expertise at the same time. Thank you, Julie. Preliminary question: when you talk about funding and sustainability, what is the normal cost of an observatory? What do we need to pay? What is costly, in fact, in terms of equipment? Well, I would say that it is changing. It depends on the structure. The people that take a lot of lines on the budget, even our institutional partners, which ask us to coordinate this strategy, which is very ambitious, that will allow us to collect high resolution data every 3 years. And when we consider the amount of the acquisition, it's rather difficult, but when we see the scale at the long term, it is justified, but it depends on the scale of working. So on this question of sustainability, I think that we need to have a team dedicated to the project and a structure adapted to the observatory for the project to last longer for many years. And from the time when the whole partners wished our action to last long, and there was a ad hoc a structure being created, it was a condition to for the long-term sustainability and a dedicated structure for the project. And there was also the issue of data verification, because if we do not make sure that the data are secured and so on, knowing that now we use a lot of IT infrastructure which are highly performing, but that can also be vulnerable to cyber attacks or, as mentioned, Aina, people who this issue of securization of data that are produced along the years. Short question with a rapid answer, because we have an interpreter. I would like to thank him, because it is really difficult for him, because we go beyond the time that is allocated as well for this meeting to interpret all of the things that we are saying. In fact, to make sure that the data in a secured space, that it is accessible along the time and available on,
En tout cas, qu'on n'utilisait pas.
Throughout the time. I mean, that we should not use them not only for the public, but it is a big stake for observatory network that we need to fund and aggregate data. So that is the heart of our work. So I imagine that the public financing that go along these are rather easily spent. So it is an acronym.
C'est vraiment un enjeu.
In fact, I forgot to use to mention this acronym for the 4 adjectives of the data. Maybe thank you very much. Last question for Aina and Bellarmine. Sorry for this. It will be the last question. So, and thank you for staying for as long as you could. I see that you are raising your hand, and you were talking about the Marcosio project.
Le Sendo, vous voudrez rentrer, peut-être que c'est ce que tu voulais évoquer maintenant.
Maybe that's what you wanted to raise now. So on the perspective of how to make an observatory evolve along the time, and for partners also to improve in their activities. In fact, thank you. I identified some approaches to ensure the sustainability of our observatory. We all know that to operate the observatory, we need financial resources that are more important. In fact, to do that, we should not be limited to like a high scale financing and short-term financing for 1 year only, an amount that is less important, but longer as well. So it requires project submission that is more collaborative, which means by involving other countries, our research institution, we increase our chance to be considered, as I just mentioned earlier, when submitting a project to at an international level. It is highly competitive. So by increasing our chances to be considered by integrating other countries these other research institutions. This is how we managed to
de la
set up
variation
to installing the
déjà et 400
the tide gouge in Madagascar, and this way
qu'on arrive
how as well we managed to got this Marcos project I mentioned
qui sont, on
earlier,
augmente sa
which
chance
means
d'être
that by involving our institution, we have more chance to be considered for those call for proposals. So for project. So we also need to call to answer those
c'est-à-dire des financements qui peuvent aller
very big renovation project or equipment, I mean financing that can go. So generally, the embassies propose a financing dedicated to strengthen the link between your country and there. So the idea is to develop a project proposed by the embassies, and we need to submit this project to your line ministry, and the ministry will propose
et
and
c'est à
submit the
l'ambassade de
project to the embassy, and then it's up to the embassy to evaluate your project. And after that, there are also the most important approach is to integrate into the global network, which means that you have data, you have got financing, you have data, you have some ongoing activities, you have many things to present, so you can also join the global network. I was talking about the
le réseau GLOS.
sea level monitoring the global network
Exemple, il y
that
en
we
a
can
beaucoup
also join. So it's just an example. There are many global networks depending on the type of data
des
or
progrès
parameters you are measuring. But in fact, there are programs that work on satellite altimetries, which invest a lot on these global
de
networks,
calibrer les
which will allow to calibrate those satellite data
données altimétriques. Donc, en partageant
to
vos données
collect altimetric data. So by sharing your data in those
de
global
financement,
network, you are part of this network, and there are also financing dedicated for the capacity building of your staff, the possibility of collaborating with other countries to submit collaborative project I've just mentioned earlier. That's it.
J'en profite.
Thank you. Before ending, I would like to thank you can see who is working a lot in the interpretation of our exchanges. I would like to thank our the interpreter who is doing, and we apologize for him for having delayed. And thank you, Aina, Julie, Musa, and Nicolas for all of the information you have shared, for all the type of and thank you for your experience sharing today. We will meet again next week on the 10th of June. We will specifically talk about coastal erosion and climate change issues. And thank you very much to all the team on the back of stage. And let's meet again for the next session. Thank you. Thank you, Fabrice, and goodbye, everyone.
Au revoir tout le monde.